Unanimous consent, the Senate proceed to the consideration of Senate Resolution 806 submitted earlier today. Further, I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
The senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, my colleague, Senator Scott, has chosen an interesting point in this pandemic to object to public safety measures intended to protect human life and ensure scarce resources are not squandered. Over 17 million Americans, 17 million, have contracted COVID that we know of. And over 300,000 of our friends and our neighbors and loved ones are no longer with us. Think about that. September 11th was a great national tragedy. I know because I lost 700 of those 3,000 citizens on that fateful day from New Jersey. This is 100 times more than what happened on September 11th. The people we have lost are not just some nameless numbers, but mothers and fathers and grandparents. Essential parts of our hearts are gone forever due to the pandemic that has been mishandled and mismanaged from the start. And now when this virus is running unchecked through our communities, we have before us this resolution that is riddled with misstatements of fact that I find deeply concerning. No governor wants to see their constituents cut off from their daily lives. And I think we can all agree that the administration here in Washington, their inability to guide us through this crisis has left our governors holding the bag when it comes to securing resources, providing guidance, and making the difficult calls about the right public policy to prevent COVID-19 from rampaging like an unchecked bull in a china shop through our states. Because they know that the governors of our states, that the lives of their residents, our neighbors, brothers, sisters, children, and parents rest in their hands, and these difficult decisions they must make. We are still losing Americans from COVID-19 at an unprecedented rate. Hospitals throughout the country are providing an amazing level of care with exhausted providers and continued resource issues, and our economy is cratering because we cannot fully reopen it until it is safe. Now, I'm deeply troubled to see a false claim about my state and the governor banning indoor religious services. Let me be clear. Houses of worship were never ordered closed. Never. In fact, today, religious gatherings are allowed to have substantially higher capacity limits than most other gatherings. While New Jersey restricted the capacity of indoor religious services as they did with all indoor gatherings, religious gatherings were never designated as non-essential or essential, as this resolution suggests. That distinction was only applied to retail businesses. Now, perhaps religion is different in Florida, but our houses of worship are not retail businesses. Houses of worship and religious organizations have been subject to neutral restrictions that equally burden religious and non-religious entities. They were put in place to do what? To save lives, not under the guise of doing so, and certainly not for the purpose of targeting religious groups. Now, I am a man of strong faith and conviction. I have always found deep solace in the rituals and shared worship of my church. I know many of us have. But perhaps the most important part of my faith is the duty, the responsibility to care for my neighbors up and down the state of New Jersey and all across the nation. Our faith calls us to ensure the health and safety of this nation before all else. As a matter of fact, I'm reminded of a passage in the Bible from James 2:14. It says, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but do not have works? Can faith save you? If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm, and get your fill,' and yet you do not supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that? So faith by itself, it has no works, is dead. But someone will say, 'You have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I by my works will show you my faith.'" As for me, I'll continue to work for the people of New Jersey, our healthcare workers struggling to care for the thousands filling ICU hospital beds, for the families who don't know how they will pay next month's rent and keep food on the table, for the small business owner trying to keep his doors open, and yes, for churches who want to see their parishioners safe. I, however, do not intend to play these partisan games, and for those reasons, I object.
The objection is heard.
Mr. President,
Senator from Florida.
freedom of religion shouldn't be controversial. This is a fundamental right of our nation as stated in our Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. What this resolution does, it says it affirms the Senate affirms its support for the rights, liberties, and protections enshrined in the United States Constitution. There is no pandemic exception to the First Amendment. For months, across this country, liberal politicians have targeted churches, synagogues, mosques, and other houses of worship. To let this happen undermines the principle of our nation and the Constitution we have each sworn to uphold as elected officials. I don't understand why my colleague, who swore to uphold the Constitution, would object to a resolution that simply reaffirms our commitment to upholding the Constitution. We are blessed to live in a great nation that respects religious liberty and the right to worship, especially as we see countries around the world like Communist China and Iran deny their citizens these same rights. Americans have the right to worship, and government doesn't get to decide for them. I'm clearly very disappointed my colleague doesn't want to protect the First Amendment, which I will continue to stand against these misguided and hypocritical attempts to target religious institutions. I'm never going to stop fighting for the religious liberty of all Americans, even during a pandemic. Thank you, and I yield the floor.
Senator from New Jersey.
I know that my colleague, I understand, is going to be the next chair of the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee, and he has every right to do that. But what he has no right to do is misrepresent in this resolution what, at least in my state, is going on. You cannot say that churches were designated by the state of New Jersey as non-essential or essential. That's simply not true. It's simply not true. You cannot suggest that somehow these purposes are to target religions. They are to save lives. Now, maybe if my colleague and others here had spoken up when the administration was asleep at the switch as this pandemic was raging, maybe if my colleagues had spoken up when we found out that the president knew back in January or early February of this year of how vicious this pandemic could be, how contagious it could be, how it was transmitted, but said nothing to the American people, and that silence was echoed in this chamber. Well, maybe then we wouldn't be in the position that we are in. Maybe we wouldn't have lost 300,000 of our fellow Americans. So I find it really, really upsetting that in the midst of a raging pandemic, one would seek to obtain political value out of something that is just simply not the case. Simply not the case. I think there's a lot more to be done in this chamber to stop this pandemic, to stop more lives from being lost, to save our brothers and sisters, to help those who have been ravaged by the pandemic, but not to pick a few states that happen to be Democratic. Please.
Senator from Florida.
So if my colleague from New Jersey's concern is paragraph numbered 4 on page 3, I would ask him if he would object if we just take that paragraph out, and then he would be willing to affirm that the Senate believes in religious freedom.
The resolution is replete.
Senator from New Jersey.
The resolution is replete with inaccuracies, and therefore I will continue to object.
So let's, Mr.
Senator
President,
from Florida.
so let's remember, the concern was that he didn't like the section about New Jersey and said that was inaccurate, but the idea that we're going to support the Senate will support religious freedom, he is not willing to stand behind. Thank you. I yield the floor.